Hello everyone and welcome back to my kitchen. I am excited to be back today with a new and delicious layered cake recipe. I'll be making my raspberry almond cake with raspberry buttercream and almond cake layers. I have just been itching lately to put a cake together. I love the whole process of baking and making the frosting and then assembling the cake. And this one is so stunning, so delicious, and perfect for any occasion. We're going to get started with those delicate almond cake layers using a little bit of almond flour, some almond extract, and then once they're cooled, we're going to put everything together with a tart and fruity raspberry buttercream, some raspberry preserves, and garnish the cake on the top. I absolutely love the flavor combinations here, and I know you guys are going to love them too. Make sure to head on down into that video description box for the printable recipe and the instructions. I always include my recipes with metric measurements up on the website, so make sure to check that out if you do need them. Meanwhile, let's get started on this recipe. I'll start with my liquid ingredients in a large mixing bowl. Pour in 1 cup of buttermilk, 3/4 cups of cooking oil or melted butter, 4 large eggs at room temperature, add in your eggs, 1 cup of white granulated sugar, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 2 teaspoons of almond extract. I get mine on Amazon. I'm going to include a link down in the video description box below. And lots of great almond flavor. While you're mixing and measuring your wet ingredients, you'll also want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I recommend having your oven preheated for at least 15 minutes before those cake layers go in. Next, I'm going to grab my hand mixer. You can also do this in a stand mixer or simply with a hand whisk. Mix all these ingredients together for a couple minutes until the eggs are well beaten. For the dry ingredients, we'll need 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Add in 1 cup of finely ground almond flour, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Using the almond flour in this recipe will make the cake layers a little bit lighter in texture, but more delicate, and also give it lots of incredible almond flavor. If you don't have this on hand, you could simply increase the amount of all-purpose flour from 1.5 cups to 2 cups. Next, we're going to use a little sifter. I like to use this fine mesh strainer and sift the dry ingredients into the batter. And then mix everything together just until there are no clumps remaining. You can use 3 8-inch cake pans or 2 9-inch cake pans for today's recipe. I like to line the bottom with some parchment paper, and I'll be using a kitchen scale to divide the cake batter evenly between the 3 pans. This will give you really nice and even cake layers. Bake the cake layers at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 22 to 24 minutes until they're golden on the top and a toothpick inserted into the center comes out clean. Let them rest in the pans for about 5 to 7 minutes and then transfer onto a wire rack to cool completely. While the cake layers are cooling, it's the perfect time to make a batch of my raspberry buttercream. This frosting is fruity, tart, and so incredibly delicious. I have a separate video for that. I'm going to include it down in the video description box below. Once the cake layers are completely cooled, use a long serrated knife to level off the top just a little bit. If you have any doming, this will ensure you have a nice and level cake to work with. To add a little bit more almond flavor, I like to soak the cake layers very lightly with amaretto. I'm going to kind of thin it out with a little bit of water so it's not as strong. All right, let's put together this incredible cake. I have my cake layers, my raspberry buttercream. I added maybe a drop too much red food coloring, so it's a little bit brighter than my original video recipe. I also have some raspberry jam that we're going to spread in between the cake layers. And then of course my amaretto that I'm gonna soak into the cake layers. So let's go ahead and start with that first. So grab a little pastry brush, just lightly soak each cake layer. If you don't want to use alcohol, what you could do is make like a simple syrup and add a little bit of almond extract to that. Add a thin layer of raspberry buttercream next, and I like to use a little offset spatula to spread it evenly to the edges. It smells so good. I love this frosting. I've transferred some of the buttercream into a pastry bag tipped with a star tip. Today I'm using a French tart tip number 4. I like to pipe a little barrier ring around the edge of the cake layer to prevent the raspberry jam from kind of squeezing out the sides. Add on the next cake layer. For the top cake layer, you'll want to soak it first before inverting onto the top. Next, we'll apply a thin crumb coat layer of the frosting on the outside. This will seal in all the little crumbs and crevices, so you have a nice smooth finish on the outside of the cake. Make sure to chill the cake for about 15 to 20 minutes in between the layers of frosting, and then apply the final coat on the outside. To move the cake from the turntable onto a cake stand, you want to slide a knife or a spatula all the way around to make sure that the cake isn't stuck anywhere. Insert another spatula on the side, and then quickly lift and transfer the cake. All right, let's cut into this stunning cake to see what it looks like on the inside. I love all these raspberries on the top. Check out this stunning cake. I love all those delicate almond cake layers, a little bit of that filling, the raspberry filling on the inside. This is gonna be so delicious. That's it for my raspberry almond cake. I love how this turned out, even though the frosting is a little bit more red than I had anticipated it to be, so be really careful when you add any red food coloring into your frosting. But I love the raspberries on top, and then the inside looks so incredible too with those delicate almond cake layers. Don't forget to head on down into that video description box for the recipe link. I always include all of my recipes with metric measurements up on the website, so if you need those, make sure to check that out. Meanwhile, I'm going to dig in and enjoy. This looks incredible. Grab a little bit of the fresh raspberries off the top, some of that cake, some of the raspberry filling on the inside. simply incredible. The flavors here are phenomenal. You get some of that delicate almond flavor. It's not overwhelming, so it's not like an in-your-face almond flavor. You have a little bit of the amaretto, a little bit of the almond flavor in the cake, and the cake layers themselves are so delicate, all thanks to the almond flour we added in there. Super soft, and that amaretto adds a little bit more of that moisture in there. And then I love having the raspberry preserves on the inside there. The raspberry buttercream adds like this little tart element to this whole cake. Just everything combined together, it just tastes incredibly delicious. You guys are going to love this cake. Let's dig in for some more. The way the flavors come together in this cake is just unbeatable. It almost reminds me of like a summertime wedding cake. Get a little bit of that fruitiness, a little bit of the almond flavor. It is so good. You guys are going to love this recipe at home. Thank you so much for watching my latest episode. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'll see you next time with a new recipe.